It all started with a breakup. One of those gut-wrenching, soul-crushing breakups that leave you feeling like your heart's been ripped right out of your chest. I'll spare you the gory details, but suffice it to say it was bad. Real bad. I thought he was the one, you know. The love of my life, my soulmate, all that cheesy stuff. But it turns out he had other ideas. So there I was, heartbroken and sobbing, stumbling through the crowded club with tears streaming down my face. I just needed to get away, to find someplace quiet where I could lick my wounds in peace. That's when I spotted it, the bathroom. It was like a beacon of hope in the midst of all the chaos, a sanctuary where I could hide away from the world and cry my eyes out in peace. I pushed my way through the crowd, ignoring the stares and whispers as I made my way to the back of the club. And when I finally reached the bathroom, I didn't waste any time. I pushed open the door and stumbled inside, desperate for some relief from the pain that was tearing me apart. The bathroom was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of cheap perfume and stale alcohol, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to be alone with my thoughts, to wallow in my misery without anyone judging me. I made a beeline for the nearest stall, my vision blurred with tears as I fumbled with the lock. And when I finally managed to get the door open, I collapsed inside, sinking to the floor in a puddle of despair. I buried my face in my hands, my body racked with sobs as I let the tears flow freely. I didn't care how pathetic I looked, how much of a mess I was. All I cared about was the pain that was tearing me apart from the inside out. But then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. I glanced down at the floor of the stall, my heart skipping a beat as I realized what I was seeing. It was a pool of centipedes, dozens of them writhing and squirming in the dim light, their long, spindly legs twitching with a sickening rhythm. I recoiled in horror, my stomach churning with disgust as I scrambled to get away from the creepy crawlies below me. But there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide from the nightmare that had suddenly become my reality. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, threatening to choke the life out of me as I struggled to come to terms with what was happening. How had I not noticed them before? How had I managed to stumble into this hellish trap without even realizing it? But there was no time for questions, no time for answers. All I could do was sit there, paralyzed with fear, as the centipedes continued to writhe and squirm beneath me. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the bathroom door swung open and a voice called out my name. It was one of my friends, come to check on me and make sure I was okay. But as she stepped inside the stall and saw the horror that lay below me, her scream echoed through the bathroom, sending shivers down my spine. The next thing I knew, we were both scrambling to get out of there, running as fast as we could from the nightmare that had suddenly become all too real. I never did find out how those centipedes got there, or why they had chosen that particular bathroom stall as their home. But one thing's for sure, I'll never forget the terror of that night, the feeling of helplessness as I realized that I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. It all started innocently enough. I'd be going about my day doing my thing, when suddenly out of nowhere, I'd get this overwhelming feeling of déjà vu. You know, that weird sensation like you've been there and done that before. Yeah, that one. At first I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just one of those weird quirks of the brain, nothing to worry about. But then, it started happening more and more frequently, until it felt like I was stuck in a never-ending loop. I'd be having a conversation with a friend, and suddenly, I'd know exactly what they were going to say before they even said it. Or I'd be walking down the street, and I'd recognize every single detail of my surroundings, even though I knew I'd never been there before. It was like I was living the same moments over and over again, trapped in a never-ending cycle of déjà vu. And let me tell you, it was starting to drive me crazy. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was all just a figment of my imagination. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any weirder, they did. I started noticing little inconsistencies in the world around me. Things that shouldn't have been there. Things that didn't make any sense. I'd see people who I could have sworn were long gone, or buildings that had been torn down years ago. It was like the world itself was glitching out, trapped in its own never-ending loop. I tried to talk to someone about it, to get some help, but nobody believed me. They all just laughed it off, told me I was being paranoid. But I knew better. I knew that something was seriously wrong, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. So I started keeping track of everything, every conversation, every detail, every moment of déjà vu. I filled notebooks with my observations, trying to find some pattern, some explanation for what was happening to me. But the more I dug, the more confused I became. There was no rhyme or reason to the loops, no logic behind the madness. It was like I was caught in a never-ending maze with no way out. And then, just when I thought I was going to lose my mind, I had a breakthrough. I stumbled upon an old book in the back of a dusty bookstore, hidden away on a forgotten shelf. The book was filled with stories of people just like me, people who had experienced the same endless loops, the same never-ending déjà vu. And buried deep within its pages was the answer I had been searching for all along. According to the book, the loops were caused by a rift in the fabric of reality itself, a glitch in the matrix, if you will. And the only way to break free from the cycle was to confront the source of the glitch head-on. I didn't fully understand what it meant at the time, but I knew that I had to try. So, armed with nothing but my determination and a sense of dread, I set out to confront the source of the loops once and for all. It wasn't easy, let me tell you. I had to navigate through a maze of twisted memories and distorted realities, fighting against the never-ending tide of déjà vu that threatened to swallow me whole. But in the end, I did it. I found the source of the glitch, a strange, pulsating orb of light hovering in the air like something out of a sci-fi movie. And as I reached out to touch it, to finally break free from the endless cycle of déjà vu, everything went white. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of my apartment, covered in sweat and shaking with exhaustion. But the loops were gone. The never-ending cycle of déjà vu had finally come to an end. I don't fully understand what happened that day, or how I managed to break free from the glitch in the matrix. But one thing's for sure. I'll never forget the endless echoes of déjà vu that haunted me, or the sense of relief that washed over me when they finally stopped. Dude me. If you've enjoyed our spine-tingling tales and crave more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Until next time.